Good morning, everyone. Here's your Mormon news update for February 28th, 2025. First off, today we will go to the church newsroom for an article entitled Stewardship of Tithing Funds, Recent Court Ruling Acknowledges Church Integrity. President Gordon B. Hinckley long kept a small widow's mite prominently displayed on his credenza. For the 15th President of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, it was a reminder, a constant reminder of the sanctity of the funds with which we have to deal. They come from the widow. They are her offering as well as the tithe of the rich man, and they are to be used with care and discretion for the purposes of the Lord. It's a little funny to me that they would speak of the widow's mite here. If you really want to know how carefully the church does and does not use tithing, go to thewidowsmite.org, where among other things you will learn that although the church brags about its charitable exploits, they do in fact use less than 1% of their income for humanitarian aid. The statement from the church goes on to say, throughout the history of the church, whether in times of financial scarcity or plenty, few things are of greater concern or given greater care by church leaders than the use of consecrated tithing donations. How the Church of Jesus Christ, or any faith, administers its tithes and offerings is an important part of the freedom afforded to religions as part of their sacred responsibilities. AKA, we're super careful with tithing funds, but when we aren't, it's none of your business. It then says this was highlighted recently when the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals in the United States unanimously dismissed a lawsuit challenging how church funds and proceeds from investments were used for a church project. Notice they don't reference that church project, which was a high-end shopping mall. A mall that probably a large portion of their members can't even afford to shop at. Unanimous decisions of this nature are rare and remarkable, and the judges sent a clear message in their ruling. No reasonable juror could conclude that the church misrepresented the source of funds for the City Creek project. Okay, so it does come out there, but City Creek project? High-end shopping mall. That's what they used those funds for. It then says, in the careful use of tithing funds, prophets act knowing they are ultimately accountable to the highest judge, the Lord Jesus Christ, for how these sacred donations are used. That stewardship weighs most heavily. Is that really the case, though? Because every endowed member of the church, top leaders included, pledges all they have to the church, not Jesus. The temple language says, and I quote, "It is that you do consecrate yourselves, your time, talents, and everything with which the Lord has blessed you, or with which he may bless you, to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints." The statement then says, the biblical principle of tithing, giving 10% of one's income to contribute to the Lord's work through his church, comes with both an ancient and modern promise that God will open you the windows of heaven and pour you out a blessing that there shall not be room enough to receive it. I personally saw that blessing when I left the church, and instead of paying tithing to a multi-billion-dollar organization, I used that 10% to pay my own bills and take care of my children. Back to the statement, that promise is being fulfilled today. The church has been blessed with the resources needed from sacred tithing donations to support the worldwide spiritual and temporal work of helping people live the gospel of Jesus Christ, caring for those in need, inviting all to receive the gospel of Jesus Christ, and uniting families for eternity. Wise stewardship of these funds and deeper understanding of how they are cared for by the church and protected by law will ensure that the Lord's great work continues to bless millions of people throughout the world. Guess who it will also bless? Those Mormon leaders who personally benefit from those funds with no debt, the best medical care, first-class travel around the world, and so many other things. While they enjoy these luxuries, they stand up in conference and say things like Lynn G. Robbins said over the Pulpit in General Conference in April 2005. Quote, "If a destitute family is faced with the decision of paying their tithing or eating, they should pay their tithing." Close quote. Now let's go to an update from returnandreport.org. It is an app for tracking sacrament meeting attendance numbers. For the week of February 23rd, 2025, 25 reports were submitted from 9 states, and Australia, Austria, Belgium, Canada, New Zealand, Philippines, Switzerland, and the United Kingdom. Average attendance was 124.9, with a global ward size average of 548. Average attendance rate is 22.8%. 939 reports have been submitted since inception. The rolling average attendance overall is 119.5 people for a rate of 21.8%. If you attend church, you can count people and contribute for the next report. Just go to returnandreport.org. Now let's go to the ex-Mormon subreddit for this little glimpse into Mormon life. This poster says, "So I live with my sister's family and her 4 kids and our parents. There is some kind of youth performance coming up in their ward this Sunday where the kids got to write some of their own lines that they will recite. At dinner, they shared with me some of their parts that they wrote. Something written by my 10-year-old nephew was, 'Nephi was brave to murder Laban.' This was disturbing to me. Teaching a kid that murder is brave? I tried to explain to the kids that murder is wrong and you shouldn't do it even if a voice in your head tells you to, even if you think that voice is God. All the while being kid-splained that murder is okay as long as God said to do it, and getting shushed by the kid's grandma, my mom. It's just scary." And now let's go to buildingsaltlake.com for an article about another old LDS meeting house being used for a much better purpose. Already occupying the historic Armstrong Mansion at the northwest corner of 700 East and 100 South, local service provider The Other Side Academy held a groundbreaking ceremony last week for its expanded campus in the Central City neighborhood. The project will include an adaptive reuse of the former 12th Ward Chapel, built in 1939 in Art Modern style at 630 East 100 South. The 1.25-acre site, across the street from the Armstrong Mansion, was conveyed from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints to The Other Side Holdings LLC in 2023. The Other Side Academy is a life skills academy with locations in Denver and Salt Lake City. The expanded campus is being built for a residential program for people transitioning from homelessness and incarceration. The clients are being prepared to live at the Other Side Village, the tiny home community that opened in December that Salt Lake City and partners are building at 1850 West Indiana Avenue. Now we will go to City Weekly for some really interesting commentary about BYU. I will put the link to this article in the show notes, as I always do, and I would highly encourage you to read it. It's very good. We will just focus on a few parts. It says, Clark Gilbert, under the direction of top leaders, has made hiring and firing standards at church schools increasingly opaque and has stoked an overall atmosphere of fear among professors who publish research or hold opinions out of step with church positions. This moment reminds many Latter-day Saints of a speech given by Apostle Jeffrey R. Holland to BYU faculty in August of 2021. In it, he lauded BYU's history and chastised faculty for embracing positions that undermine the faith's 20th century conservative turn. Namely, he called upon professors to take up musket fire in defense of LDS teaching on sexuality, gender, and marriage. Holland's speech is emblematic of a broader struggle between social justice-oriented higher education and conservative religious philosophies. Like other religious universities, BYU finds itself at an anxious crossroads, seeking to remain relevant while attempting to preserve tenets increasingly viewed as anachronistic and discriminatory. How far is BYU willing to go with policies that discriminate? Well, so far, we know they've gone pretty far. Near the end of his musket speech, Holland offered a bold assertion that BYU must have the will to stand alone. If at a future time that mission means foregoing some professional affiliations and certifications, then so be it, he said. There may come a day when the price we are asked to pay for such association is simply too high, too inconsistent with who we are. At least verbally, Holland acknowledged a willingness to die on the hill of heteronormativity and abandon, if necessary, the accreditation and licensure that is crucial to secular education. Extending the logic further, Holland would presumably forego federal funding and research grants that BYU students and faculty rely on. Another plausible channel of pressure might come from NCAA athletics, with teams declining to play BYU in protest of discriminatory policies. Hypothetically, the Big 12 could decide one day to oust BYU over its prohibitions on gender transitions and same-sex relationships/marriages on campus. If push came to shove, would Holland's assertion simply amount to a rhetorical bluff or be reflective of reality? I think that is an amazing question, and this is what they go on to say. BYU faced similarly precarious circumstances in the 1960s and 70s regarding the church's odious temple and priesthood ban on members of African descent. During this time, the Justice Department conducted a thorough investigation of BYU in 1968, concluding that BYU was not in compliance with the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Ultimately, the more pragmatic voices won out, and BYU made the necessary changes to comply with the Justice Department, most notably recruiting a series of Black athletes. It seems fair to assume that if the government threatened to withhold BYU funding, or if protests increased in intensity, LDS leaders would make accommodations similar to those made by their predecessors a half-century ago. Moreover, if governing bodies determined that certain BYU programs were undeserving of accreditation and licensing, it is likely they would make any necessary changes. I believe Holland was bluffing, and I agree with this author. In order for those important changes to occur, public sentiment around LGBTQ issues will need to shift significantly toward increased acceptance and affirmation. When that moment inevitably arrives, and funding, reputation, and respectability are on the line, BYU will be forced to make similar changes to those made over 50 years ago concerning race and provide full equality for LGBTQ students. I don't know if I will live to see that day, but I do think that it's coming. Now we will go back to the Ex-Mormon subreddit for this really thought-provoking post. Hey all, 50-something here, still deconstructing. This hit me the other day. I never had the opportunity to freely choose to become Mormon. I was born into it. I was programmed and groomed into it by a finely tuned machine. Parents, teachers, leaders, peers, college professors, all of that. Recently, something came in the mail. It was a postcard from a neighbor showing a picture of their beautiful 8-year-old child all dressed in white, a beaming smile, with the invitation, "Come celebrate with us as blank makes a covenant to be like Jesus." It shook me. I was angry because this child has no choice whatsoever to decline this covenant. And it's not just because this child is only 8 years old. All through the grooming process, it's the same non-choice for everyone, no matter their age. I had no real honest opportunity to refuse to go to seminary, no real opportunity to decline to serve a mission, no real choice to refuse temple covenants. Sure, once I was already inside the temple surrounded by family holding that stupid packet, and before I even knew what I'd be promising or that I'd be swearing a death oath, the audio voice invited me to withdraw. Really? That's even more manipulative because it made me think for decades that I really had chosen this. Anyway, shout out to my therapist who has helped me to see the reality of all of this. Although I never got to choose to become a Mormon, I did get to choose to become an ex-Mormon, and for that, I am truly grateful. Choosing to become an ex-Mormon has been one of the most beautiful parts of my life. Let's finish up today with this quote that says, "Narcissists always see themselves as victims, no matter how horribly they've treated someone else. To them, the problem is not their lying, cheating, stealing, and abuse. The problem is that you started to notice all of those things." And that's your update for today, folks. I absolutely hope you have the day that you deserve.